Going to start talking about ancient Greece. First, I want to show you guys a map of ancient Greece, and this is a physical map of ancient Greece that I found online. The reason why this is a good map is it really shows you the different geographical features. It shows you that Greece was very mountainous, which it was. It shows you it's a string of many islands and a peninsula, which is the Peloponnesus Peninsula right there. It also shows you that it's surrounded by seas, the Ionian Sea on the left, the Aegean Sea on the right. It shows you that this physical makeup of Greece really impacted its makeup. Because it was so mountainous, Greece was divided into city-states because they couldn't all be united under one government because of all of the mountainous regions. It also relied heavily on trade. It's surrounded by oceans. They don't have a lot of natural resources on the mainland. So Greece relied heavily on trade to get a lot of their natural resources. So as you can see, the geography of Greece really does impact how Greece governs itself and also their economy. First of all, Greece was settled by the Indo-European group called the Mycenaeans in about 2000 BC. And the Mycenaeans, the reason they're called the Mycenaeans is because they settled on Greece's mainland, and then their leading city was known as Mycenae. And the Mycenaeans, they were ruled by warrior kings. They developed very strong trade relationships with other areas, and they also had a very flourishing culture. The Mycenaeans was the group that got involved in this Trojan War, and you guys have probably heard of that. It's a 10-year war that was against Troy, which was an independent trading town on Anatolia, which is now modern-day Turkey. And it was supposedly over the wife of a Greek king named Helen. She was supposedly kidnapped by Trojan warriors. So the Trojan War was supposedly fought between the Mycenaeans and the Trojans. There's not really proof that this actually happened. However, archaeologists are now finding that there probably was a city of Troy, but the fact that it was fought over a woman was probably very unlikely. It was more than likely fought over the control of the Aegean Sea. There was a book written about the Trojan War called the Iliad by Homer, which most of you guys probably have heard of before. But after this Trojan War, the Mycenaean culture really falls, and a new culture comes in called the Dorians. And there's no written record of the Dorians. There was really a period of about 400 years where there was no written record kept, and they had to rely on oral stories. And the most famous oral storyteller was Homer, who writes the stories, or who orated the story of the Odyssey and the Iliad, which eventually gets written down. And those are both stories depicting characters around the Trojan War. Greek mythology was also very popular in the early civilizations, and it develops into Greek religion. Greeks came up with different stories to tell about their gods that discuss the formation of life or the formation of to explain different things. You have probably studied Greek mythology in your English classes, but you need to understand that it was an important part of Greek culture. Therefore, as you probably know, if the Greeks have many gods, they are polytheistic. Okay, so about 750 BC, after the Mycenaeans and the Dorians kind of die out, they start to assimilate into what is now at this time known as Greek culture. And Greece was divided into city-states, like I said before, because it was such a mountainous place. They had to divide up into city-states in order to efficiently rule. The city-states, like I said, they were cities that operate on their own individual government. That's review. And the two main city-states that we are going to talk about are Athens and Sparta. There were many different ways that you could govern a city-state. You could govern it as a monarchy, which is when a king or a queen or a monarch rules the city-state. It could be run as an aristocracy, where the wealthy landowners have the power and they rule the government. Or it could be ruled like an oligarchy, which is like a government that's ruled by just a few powerful people in the city-state. And we're going to talk about each of these governments. One thing about the polis, or the city-state, that was very important is all people were required to defend it. Hoplites were known as foot soldiers, and it was every male in the community was forced to defend the polis. And they did this using the phalanx formation. And the phalanx formation was just basically like a big rectangle with spears going up and spears going out, and they use shields to protect themselves. Think back to the movie 300, and that gives you a great example of what a phalanx might look like. And this is just a little picture showing you what a phalanx might be, with the people at the back with their spears up and the people in the front with their spears going out, using the shields to protect themselves. But this was how the hoplites, or the foot soldiers in the Greek city-states, would defend themselves, or the polis. Okay, the first city-state we're going to talk about is Sparta, and Sparta was a military city-state. You guys probably already knew that. Sparta was very, very much into conquering other city-states and making sure that they were known as a military power. Sparta conquers a neighboring city-state, Messina, and turns their people into helots, or peasants. They turn them basically into slaves of the land. The Spartans actually become very strong because the Helots do try to revolt against the Spartans, and the Spartans almost lose their land to the Helots. So they decide from then on that they are going to train militarily and become very strong so they never have to put down another peasant uprising again. Sparta is ruled as an oligarchy, meaning that they are ruled by a few influential nobles in the land. It did have an assembly, but it also had a council of elders, and the assembly would bring proposed laws to the council of elders to vote on. So the council of elders really had the last say. And there were 5 people in Sparta that carried out the laws, and those are called ephors. And the ephors would carry out the laws that the council would pass. Sparta also had 2 kings in charge that controlled the military. As you know, it was a very military state, so that would be very important. Education in Sparta centers around military training. Boys leave home at 7. They go straight into military training. Young ladies, they were not put into military training, but they were oftentimes they were required to live very rough lives. They were very athletic. They were expected to put Sparta before their own lives as well, just like the men were trained to do so. So the girls were very rough. Sparta had the most powerful army from about 600 to 371 BC, and the arts and expression and any new ideas and technologies really declined because of that, because they spent all of their time focused on military training and no time focused on the development of arts and philosophy and outside things that the Athenians were really thinking about at this time. Different of a city-state than Sparta, Athens is actually the birthplace of direct democracy. Athens is not as much of a military state as Sparta is. They actually have some expression and thought and some different things coming out of Athens during this time. But let's talk about Athens' government for a little bit. Athens starts out as kind of an aristocracy. It's ruled by the nobility. However, there becomes some clashes between the rich and the poor. They are not happy about the abuse of power by the rich, and the poor don't have a say. So the peasants demand a written code of laws by a lawmaker named Draco, and he writes this code of laws, but he puts in it debt slavery. And debt slavery was basically that if you owed someone money, then you were a slave to them until you paid it back. So the peasants were obviously not happy about this. Basically, a trusted statesman named Solon comes in, and the Athenians give him power to come in and reform the law. Solon comes in and he ends debt slavery, and he allows these citizens to participate in government, starts the ball rolling on modern day democracy. He initiates trade, he initiates political as well as economic change. However, he neglects land reforms and farming. So he kind of drops the ball on that, and there becomes lots of fighting between the wealthy landowners and the poor farmers after he leaves power. After he leaves power, a wealthy noble by the name of Pisistratus comes into power, and he becomes a tyrant. But he's able to become that tyrant and win over the peasants by purchasing them farm equipment and giving them initiating building projects in order to employ the poor in Athens. But he is a tyrant in Athens. So After he leaves power, the man named Cleisthenes comes in, and Cleisthenes wants to make Athens a full democracy. He wants to initiate further reforms that would break up the power of the nobility and give more power to the people. Cleisthenes, he creates the Council of 500 that basically counsels the assembly, and they were made up of citizens, and Cleisthenes allows citizens to propose laws to the assembly, which his reforms allow what is known as a limited democracy. Athenian democracy is very famous, and we'll talk more about that later, but Athens is known for creating direct democracy, and they had a rule by the people, and citizens could participate directly in government, but it could only be males, only free adult males, and they also had to be a citizen of Athens. So Athens is the birthplace of direct democracy. So when you think about it, how does this direct democracy influence our government today that was initiated in Athens? That's just something to think about. Okay, so you have Athens and you have Sparta, and then you have the Persians. If you have ever seen the movie 300, this is what this movie is about, was the Persian Wars between the Greeks and Persia. And the Persian Wars actually start when Athens sends aid to the Ionian Greeks that are revolting against an earlier Persian conquest. So the Athenians send them some help because they are trying to revolt against the Persians who had conquered them years before. So the Persians are not happy about that, and they vow that they are going to defeat the Athenians and bring them down. And they do this at the Battle of Marathon. The Persians land with their fleet at Marathon, and there about 10,000 Athenians using the phalanx formation are there waiting for them, and they are able to defeat the Persians, but their city is left defenseless. So the Athenians, they won the battle, but now their city is now defenseless. They don't have any of the defenses that they had before. The Battle of Thermopylae is fought later when Xerxes, the Persian ruler, is coming in, and he is blocked by the Greeks at a mountain pass at Thermopylae. However, a traitor to the Greeks is able to tip him off, and they find a way around this mountain pass through a secret path, and they're able to get through. And so now the Athenians are starting to worry. They need to know how they're going to defend their city because they know that the Persians are coming. So the Athenians evacuate the city, and they fight Persia at sea near an island of Salamis. And they are able to position themselves, the Greeks are able to position themselves in a narrow channel. So the Persians try to navigate through the channel, but they realize that it's very, very difficult to do that because the channel was so narrow. So the Greeks are able to sink about a third of the Persian fleets. After the Greeks are able to do that, the Spartans go on to defeat Persia at the Battle of Plataea. So the Persians and the Greeks obviously have some tension. The Persians are trying to expand into Greek territory, and the Greeks did not let them. So that is the Persian Wars. The Persian Wars on the Greeks was a very good thing. The Greeks started to feel more confident. They felt more free. They knew they could defend themselves from great powers like the Persian Empire. They create what is known as the Delian League, which is a league of about 140 city-states, and Athens becomes the leader of this Delian League because they had a very strong navy, and the Delian League is able to rid the surrounding territories of Greece of Persian threat, and Athens at this time is surged into this great golden age, and we're going to really focus on that golden age of art and democracy, drama, and philosophy on Wednesday. But it was the result of the Persian War and the confidence that they felt coming out.